What's up? This is Joe from the Buckeye Cast, dropping a shitload of content your way. Here we have press conference with Coach Day and Jim Knowles. Coach Day is up first, followed by Jim Knowles. Keep it locked in here to this podcast feed or the YouTube channel. We have Coach Day and Jim Knowles today. Then tomorrow we have the secondary with the safeties and corners and their coaches. And then Wednesday we have the receivers with Brian Hartline and special teamers with Parker Fleming. All right, I'll be back in afterwards to wrap her up. Here is Coach Day.
Ryan, I know our assumption over here is that JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer are going to be pretty good this year. Wondering how that assumption is going, how's it looking, and what have you seen from those two guys in camp?
Both guys have had very good camps. They really practiced hard last year. And, you know, for a lot of these younger guys who really had their senior years affected by COVID, you can see how important getting in here and getting all these reps are in college. And they really put it in last year. I mean, last year they played. They would go down to the scout team. They were there, and they've kind of carried that over into this year. And now they're a year stronger, a year bigger, more experienced, understand what's going on, and been very impressed with both of those guys. And I think they're going to have great seasons.
How well do they complement each other? Their styles?
I mean, they're both very good defensive ends, you know, and I think the key to that is when you're sliding a protection one way or another, you want to have complements on both sides, because it's one thing to slide one way or chip one way, but when you have really dominant players on both sides, then it's a challenge, and eventually you're going to be in a one-on-one situation. If you're not in a one-on-one situation, that means there's probably only two or three guys in a route because there's extra guys helping. So it's just a numbers game, but it's great to have dominant players on the perimeter.
Right behind him, Spencer Holbrook, Lemon Rowe.
Right, when you look at this defense, I think 2 weeks ago Jim said that 25% of it was installed, but that would grow exponentially. I know you've been asked this a few different times, but you're only 2 weeks away from the game now. Are you seeing exactly what you need to see to know that these guys are ready to go?
Well, yeah, I think so. They're playing with great confidence. They're playing with great energy. And I think what Jim's done a really good job of is, you have your whole offense or your whole defense, but then you figure out what areas fit the guys that you have. And this is a different group than he had, the previous stop and in the previous years. So I think he's, recognized some things that, maybe he had a little bit differently at Oklahoma State than he has here. And he's tailored the scheme to that, which is great. It's a challenge on offense. And so, I don't know what percentage he would have in. I think I'd say most of it's probably in, but, where do you spend the majority of your focus? And that's just like on offense. When we had JT, it was a lot different than Justin, and Justin a lot different than CJ and Dwayne. So, that's the sign of a good college football coach.
You had talked about, a couple others had talked about the cornerbacks and safety being a little banged up. Do you feel like you're back to where you guys need to be right there, with 2 weeks into the game?
Yeah, I mean, we had a good practice today coming out of the weekend. So, the goal is to be at full force heading into next week's practice, and overall, feel good about it.
Fourth row middle, Patrick Murphy, 24/7 Sports. Ryan, you've made kind of your thoughts on the transfer portal and the policy you guys have pretty clear, but with kind of the situations with guys getting banged up and whatnot, do you guys discuss as a staff how to maybe reevaluate that, both in terms of going into the portal to get guys, but also keeping guys in the program that maybe could have helped you after they left after last season? Is that something you guys talk about regularly given the situation?
Every year you have 85 scholarships, and you have 110 guys in preseason camp, and you just make sure that the numbers are right. And so every year it's a balance to figure out what that mixture is of guys. How many guys are kind of a starter level, backup level, and then usually some guys who are developmental. And then there's situations where you need someone to step in and fill a hole. Is typically the way that we've done it. When you look at Trey Sermon and Jonah Jackson and some of the guys that we've had, it was great to have Tanner come in because we didn't really have a lot of depth at nickel, and so now he and Cam are there, and that's really good. So that's typically the way we've addressed it. And we were, I think, at almost 90 guys going into the spring, so we were 5 over. And we knew that because you knew that that along the line there's going to be some attrition, and when you have some position battles, that happens. And very pleased with the 85 that we have on, some really good young players and some really talented guys with experience.
Third row, right, Rob Olive, Columbus Dispatch.
Ryan, you've done this a long time, and there's a lot of changes on defense. What's it like going into that first game, being pretty confident of what you're going to see, but not certain? I guess it's like practice range in golf, taking it to the course.
Yeah.
Is there a similarity there?
Yeah. I mean, anytime you go into that first game, guys kind of tweak some things on both sides of the ball, and when you have different players, you want to utilize their talents, and again, that's the key to a good college football coach. You can't pick up anybody off of waivers or really draft anybody exactly the way you want. You got to recruit guys, and a lot of times you're recruiting the best players available within reason. I mean, you want guys that fit your scheme, but you're not just going to pass up on a great player. And when you go into that first game, there's going to be adjustments year in and year out based on your personnel. So there's a time where you have to have contingency plans in place for the first game.
Such a thing as a gamer too, a guy that's a okay practice player, but then the lights come on, and you don't know that until the game. And how long does it take to really know a guy is a guy?
Yeah. Well, we try to do that as much as we can in practice, and we try to simulate the games as much as possible. It's not that easy. We have a spring game where we have a crowd in there, and we're in the shoe. We've been in the stadium several times now. And you don't know, I guess, that you're in that game, but we try to do the best we can to simulate a game and get an idea of what's going on. But it is true. I mean, even when we go into the stadium for scrimmages, sometimes you see things that you're like, that we haven't seen that in 5 practices, and then all of a sudden you see it. And then the more they do it, the more comfortable they are in that environment. So that's why we try to make practice as close as we can to the game, and even harder maybe sometimes.
Have you ever seen guys not play up to what you thought they'd be because the lights are so bright, or not?
What we say is, you're going to play in high pressure, high stressful environments to the level of your training, and if you think about some of the great players who are quote unquote clutch, some of those guys, when you look at their numbers in those clutch environments, they were actually average. They did average, and so all you have to do is trust your training in those moments. Now, there are some guys who overthink it and struggle, and get themselves all worked up, but that's part of the process of learning to play and growing up. And but there is a lot of pressure on everybody, and we talk about a lot that the pressure should be felt during the week. And if you put a lot of pressure on yourself Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, then you shouldn't feel the pressure on Saturday. It's like going into a test unprepared. If you don't know the information, you're going to be nervous and sweating in the back row. But if you know the stuff cold, then you walk in and you're not as nervous anymore. So we really try to stress that the middle of the week is where you should feel the most pressure.
Second row left, Stephen Means, Cleveland.com.
Right. When you get quarterbacks in here during the camps, and when you go watch them, or Corey goes watch them, what specific traits, if any, are you looking at? I know everybody's got their own thing, but are there certain things that you need to see in order to feel like they can play here?
Yeah. I mean, when you're evaluating quarterbacks, first off, there's the physical traits. So, your size, the movement, the accuracy, those types of things. Then there's the next kind of thing you're looking at is spatial intelligence, spatial awareness, in terms of the accuracy, understanding body language, being able to have some awareness and see different things. Some guys, we call them like carnival quarterbacks, they could go and throw the ball into a big tire 100 times in a row, but once those things start moving, they can't anticipate. So I think that spatial intelligence and awareness is really good, being able to read body language. Certainly leadership and the way that they carry themselves is very, very important. And then the ability to use mistakes as feedbacks, to learn, because you're going to fail. This game and quarterback play is you're constantly failing. But if you can learn from those mistakes and continue to grow and have that growth mindset, then that allows you the chance to keep building. When you look at the best quarterbacks who have played in this game and the guys who play in the NFL, they've all gone through those types of things, adversity. They've learned from mistakes. They've had setbacks in their career, and they grow from them and they get stronger. And so I think when you kind of look at somebody in a whole, there's all those pieces that come with it, and that's what we look for.
Because of how that position is set up, only going to be able to hit 15 times out of the year. So are there things that maybe you just don't know until you finally get them on the field? And are those things pretty consistent regardless of who the quarterback is?
Yeah, I mean, you can anticipate pretty good in practice and start to see things and patterns and trends, but until you're in the fire with somebody, you really don't quite know.
Front row right, Austin Ward.
From wherever.
Parts on it.
We did that.
Ryan, do you have any concern level with those cornerbacks specifically about their availability for next week at this point? We know Cam's just been on a pitch count. Denzel banged up a little bit, and then Jordan. I know those aren't long term, but how concerned are you about that position?
No, I mean, I feel like we're going to be at full strength going into that first game, and the majority of those guys had really good springs, and they did miss a couple guys missed a couple things here, but that's kind of training camp, and the goal is to have everybody there at full strength going into really next week. So we have a full week of practice starting next Monday, but this week's going to be a good one too. I mean, we're decent shape.
You had that jump up and get you a corner specifically for Minnesota last year. If J.K. or Jair have to jump in there, how have their camps been? Because I assume they've been getting maybe more workload than you anticipated.
They have. I think both of those guys have practiced their tail off, and they're going every day up against Marvin Jackson and Mecca and Julian, and so I give them a lot of credit. I mean, they're out there every day. They've gotten better, both of those guys, and sometimes it's hard for them to see that, but they've gotten much better, and again, it goes back to what you see in practice, what you're going to see in a game, and if they just keep grinding on these days, then they're going to find themselves in games really fast, and you try to figure out who's game ready right now, and they're getting real close.
The camp portion of this month is over. Like, what is this specific week like?
Yep.
What's the goal here?
Notre Dame is next week, and then that's where the focus goes. But this week, same thing. Trying to classes start tomorrow for us, so getting into the rhythm of that and coming in the afternoons. But start to introduce some of the Notre Dame stuff, but stay locked in on fundamentals and discipline, and still do some good on good.
Third row left, Bill Landis,
Ryan, I know you guys here have the luxury of being able to play a lot of guys if you want to, just because of the way you recruit the talent you have. But I'm thinking of the beginning of last year when you were just playing so many guys on defense. Was there anything learned in those two games that, in the lines of you're playing a quality opponent week one, let's find our 11 to 15 guys and put them on the field and not worry about running guys out there like we were last year?
Well, I think now we have a better feel for who guys are and where they are in their careers, and they have experience. And going into last year, because of the whole COVID thing, certainly all the linebackers were green, and same thing with a couple of the safeties. And I mean, up front, it was a really an experienced group. This year, a little bit different. So I think we have a better feel for where everybody's at, and guys will start to build some roles. But I do think that you still have to ask yourself, is this person game ready for this first game? Are we going to trust him to put him in the game? If the answer is yes, then we'll still have some guys play multiple guys play the position. But I think to your point, it won't nearly be as much as last year.
Does a new defense complicate that at all, in the sense that if there are two backers and there are three safeties who really have it down, and maybe the group behind them is close but not quite there yet, but this is new, let's put the guys out there who know the new thing best?
Yes. But I also think that there are multiple personnel groupings, and it allows guys to grab onto some roles more than we've had in the past.
right behind him, Jacob Bench, the Lantern.
Ryan, just going back to talking about quarterbacks and stuff, talking to Corey Dennis and CJ Stroud last week, they talked about their relationship with each other. Just from what you see with them, how does Corey and CJ work together in year two for CJ being the starter? Just how do you evaluate that?
Yeah, no, I think they have a great relationship, have since recruiting, and I think that CJ has really grown in terms of his leadership this year, and just has a much more wide perspective on everything that's going on, not just his job. He sees it almost as a coach right now, and so that's important. I know his number one thing is he wants to win, and everything else is secondary, and he's practiced that way.
And then maybe a little bit away from the field a little bit. Last week, Big Ten reached a new media deal and whatnot. Just what were your thoughts on that with the new media partners? What kind of does it mean for the Big Ten, just in your eyes?
I think it's exciting, and I think that everybody involved has done an unbelievable job, and I certainly just focus on the team and in the middle of preseason camp, not really talking much about that. But Gene called me up right away and was obviously very excited about some of the things that are coming down the road for us, and so it has been a very exciting month for the Big Ten.
Hi, Ryan. You mentioned scholarships earlier. I think you indicated you might be at 85. I could be wrong. By my count, you guys are 2 under without Parker Lewis and 1 under with him. Is that maybe did a walk-on get bumped up to scholarship like a Xavier Johnson, or is my count just wrong?
No, we're at 85. Yeah. I'd have to go back and look to see exactly who that is, but yeah, we are at 85.
Did a walk-on recently get bumped up?
It may have been a little bit further back than that, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it Xavier?
I can't say.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. And then what was Evan Pryor's role going to be? And do you need someone to fill that role, or is it now, because CJ kind of indicated when we asked him about it, really it's going to be just Travion and mine are going to have bigger roles, not that they weren't going to have big roles. Is that kind of how it's going to be, or do you need somebody to kind of step into that role that Evan was going to have?
Well, yeah, quite honestly, we've been very impressed with Dallin. I think Dallin Hayden has really come on. He's been drinking through a fire hose this preseason camp, and he's had ups and downs, but I got to tell you, he's got a lot of talent, and he's our third running back right now, and he deserves it. He's played really hard. He's had his black stripe taken off, and so if he continues to grow, then we're gonna trust putting him in the game. We had a couple. We had one day full where Chip came over and did some running back, and boy, he's natural. And he's doing a great job at linebacker as well. So he'll be a guy that we could use as rain insurance if we needed him to. But just seeing him live and in color, I mean, he's a talented running back. So been very impressed with the way he's playing a linebacker as well. But we can also use him in a dual role if needed. But right now, Down will be the third running back. And again, been very impressed with his camp. For a freshman to step in like this, and he's got to use this as an opportunity now that Evan's down.
Ryan, I know Cam Babb's been in and out of practice with some injuries. Just what's his status right now?
Yeah, he's he had a setback, but not a setback that's going to cost him the whole year. So he's out for a little while, and we're hoping to get him back here in a couple of weeks.
So do you have like a timeline of when you think possibly he's going to be back?
Yeah, again, hoping in a couple of weeks that he gets back out in the field. But his situation is very unique because of his background and his history. So we're just going to trust the doctors on it and kind of see where that goes. But hoping to get him back on the field.
Basically, you have to be extra cautious because of his history.
I think so. Yeah, we're going to be smart.
Ryan, wondering what you've seen this offseason from Tommy Eichenberg's development coming from that Rose Bowl and being voted as captain.
Yeah, I mean, about what you would hope for. If you said, okay, here's what you'd like to see out of Tommy in the spring, in the preseason, and now heading into the year, about what you would expect. Leadership, toughness, productivity, just kind of a quarterback on the field right now. A guy that obviously gained a lot of experience last year and is playing at a pretty high level.
We're going to be kind of the quarterback to that middle linebacker and learning a new defense as well. It seems like he's handled that well. Why do you think that is?
I just think he's a very intelligent player. He's got a lot of competitiveness and toughness, and he likes the X's and O's of the game, but just has a great feel. Some guys can just diagnose plays at a high level, and he can process high levels of information too. So when you combine all those things, then you have a really good player.
CJ last week was talking about how much his anticipation and things like that have improved, and you were just talking about how he sees the field as a coach now. Just curious, how do you sort of push him now in this second year? And is that something we're kind of looking forward to, like how you could try to challenge him up to a higher level this offseason?
Well, I think it's just the daily grind and the daily push to get better and to figure out what he needs to improve on, what our offense needs to improve on, and every day is a work in progress, up across the board. So it's just putting one foot in front of the other, and hopefully at the end of the entire preseason camp, he's gotten better and he's improved. So there's not one area that we're saying, hey, you got to get better in this one area. It's just across the board, and the more you play, the better you are.
Is there something about him that it takes to those sort of challenges better, either holding himself accountable or just wanting that sort of outside pressure to get him there?
I mean, he's just so highly competitive, and he's just driven. He wants it really, really bad, and he's in terms of that drive and that want to, and you combine that with his intelligence and his ability. One of the more special young men I've been around in a long time.
Just to clarify on Chip Trainum, that's you're looking at that as more like an emergency situation, just have him in the back pocket.
You got it.
Second row left, Steve Hellwagon, 24/7 Sports.
Yeah, Coach, I had a question from a fan, wanted to know of the returning players, the guys who were with you last year to this point today, who are a couple guys who've just really come on and are going to be part of the plan this year that maybe didn't get to play last year or, had a lesser role?
I think at the tight end position, I've just been very impressed with Cade Stover and Mitch Rousey. These are two guys that have put their time in here and have really had good camps, very productive camps. At tight end, you have to, do a lot of stuff. You got to block. You have to protect. You have to run routes. I mean, there's a lot that is asked of you, and I've been really impressed with those two guys in particular. I'm just trying to think of another guy who's been around. Julian Fleming's had a very good camp, had a really good summer. Been impressed with him. Who else? I'd say those two guys probably jump out a little bit on offense. On defense, I think you kind of know the guys. I think that we're hoping Teron Vincent can really take the next step. He's had a really good camp, and solidify some things inside for us. So he's been a bright spot for sure. I think most of the guys, Ronnie Hickman's. I mean, these guys played, so it's not like there's any surprise there. But he's had a very solid camp.
Giving your freshman a big head, but 2 weeks in, are there one or two of them who sitting here today are going to be on the field the first game?
I learned my lesson by saying that. My phone will be buzzing by the time I walk through that door if I pick out any freshman. So, no comment.
Hey, Coach. We're going to have a chance to talk with Coach Hartline later this week on receivers. That's obviously a room that gets a ton of attention and for good reason. Specific, though, to Coach Hartline, what is his greatest asset to you? What is the strongest thing he brings to your program?
No, it's funny you say it because I think every year it changes. I think when he first got thrust into the role of wide receiver coach, he took it on and ran with it. I think the first thing is, he played here. He walked in these hallways. He wore, the block O. He played in the shoe. He's done it. And so that gives him instant credibility here and can relate well with the players. But then he went on and played and had a good career in the NFL, which, again, gives him more credibility. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to make a good coach. And I think, making that transition from player to coach for some guys is easier than others. And he's really made that transition well. And I've challenged him with, how can you really take the next step as a coach and look at it from a wider lens, understanding protections and the run game and how the protections match up with the route structures. And he's really taken to running. He's really embraced all of that. And so, his recruiting obviously speaks for itself, but I think, he's become a more complete coach and he's continuing to do that. And I'm hoping that, pays dividends for us this season.
And how about Kyle McCord's development? I mean, he's not going to get a chance to see a ton of snaps, it's most likely this year. How comfortable and confident are you with his growth and his ability to, at any point, get in there and not skip a beat offensively?
Yeah, he's made strides. He's done some really good things, and we need him to continue to do those things. We need to keep growing and keep building because it's one thing, to do it in practice, another thing to do it in a game. And so I talked to him the other day, it's hard to be the guy, who's one snap away. Sometimes you feel like you literally are one snap away, but you feel like you're not going to see the field for another year. And you can't have that you can't have that approach. You have to look at it like I'm going to be in the second play of the Notre Dame game. So, I think that's the biggest challenge for someone like Kyle, but he's made some improvements. He was really close to being a champion in the last scrimmage. So he's got to keep building and keep grinding, and he knows the areas that he has to improve on. But he's one snap away.
Deep center field, Clay Hall, WSYX.
Ryan, do you feel like you have a handle on Notre Dame, maybe defensively, because of Marcus, what he did at UC and Notre Dame?
When every year it's a different story, different journey, and that's a new defensive staff there, so they'll have different backgrounds that they're going to bring to the table, and all very, very good coaches. I worked for Al Golden at Temple and know him, and certainly have a tremendous amount of respect for him. And Marcus has obviously great history of being a defensive coordinator, and so there's a lot of good minds in that room, and they'll be well coached and have a really good scheme.
I talked to Laurinaitis up at Notre Dame. I was just curious if, and maybe it's a matter of timing or personal preference, did he ever discuss an opportunity here?
Yeah, we talked about it, and James certainly has an unbelievable football background, and got an unbelievable amount of respect for him, not only for what he did here at Ohio State, but his NFL career, and he's another tremendous coach, on their staff, and so again, it's going to be a challenge, but yeah, a ton of respect for him.
Thank you, Jerry. Speaking of carnival quarterbacks, did you win Nina a lot of dolls and stuff?
No, not so much.
I just like that term. CJ the other day was talking about the meetings he has with you and stuff, and I'm just wondering, it's rare that you've had a second-year starting quarterback. Right. Can you discuss or talk about those meetings, what level you're on with him from the standpoint of what kind of joy that even brings for you to be talking more and more big-time football? If you follow the drift?
Well, I think we used to say, you have to equate the room where, you have, in that room you have Devin, you have Kyle, and then you have CJ, and they're all 3 different years and 3 different levels of understanding of the offense. And so it's good to be all in there together sometimes, but then sometimes it's just good to pull CJ out because he's very intelligent and kind of, figure out, how to, keep growing with him and teach at his level while you don't leave the other guys behind. And so, yeah, it's been good. He can handle a lot of information, but doesn't necessarily mean you need to be really complicated either. But he sees it well, he understands it, he has really good suggestions, he has a good thought process, getting to the point where, I'll go into a drive and ask him what he thinks. Not that we're always going to do that, but it's always good to hear what he's thinking, and we have a lot of good back and forth. I mean, we were in a scrimmage the other day, it was in the red zone, and he came over to me and suggested a play, we did it and scored. And I think that's when you're starting to feel like that. And I think that's a part of play calling and being on the same page with the quarterback, because when you're in those meetings and you're talking about these things, when that play is called, you know exactly why it's been called, because we've talked about it in meetings, and so you're on the same page. And I think that's hopefully pays off again this year.
And one other quickie, the fact that Notre Dame went against Jim Knowles' defense, the 4-2-5 in the bowl game, even though he wasn't there, it was still pretty much a similar defense.
Yep.
Has that given y'all a little bit of an advantage, you think, from a preparation standpoint, to see how they sort of tried to attack it, or are there, just what's your take on that?
I don't know. I mean, they were on offense, and Oklahoma State was on defense, so I don't know if it gives an advantage to one side or the other. But yeah, I mean, it's unique that you'd end with the bowl game against those two sides, and then here we are, the first game. But I don't know exactly what that means, but certainly there's a lot of film to watch. Yep.
Just a couple more. Front row middle, Bill Rabinowitz, Columbus Dispatch.
Brian, it doesn't seem like there are a lot of position battles left. I mean, tell me if there are. Did you come out of camp getting accomplished what you needed to? What questions do you still have?
Yeah, I mean, the 3 things that we wanted to get done was toughness, discipline, and skill. I think we got tougher. We practiced really hard. I think sometimes to the point where the guys were looking at me a little sideways when we kept bringing out the ones. They're in a couple of those scrimmages, but their attitudes were excellent, and they just kept coming. And so I think we checked that box. I think we got tougher this preseason, and it was well done by everybody. Discipline of sleeping, discipline of recovery, discipline of learning your plays and understanding assignments and those type of things. I think we checked that box. And the last one was skill. Do we get better at what we do? And I think we did that as well. So, I mean, those are the 3 areas in those first 17 practices that we wanted to get done. And so we're not going to stop with those this week, but, I think we've made some progress in those areas. And like you said, guys have kind of, establish themselves, which is good to see. Because like we talked about last year, we didn't really have that. You had a bunch of guys playing, but you didn't really know what you had. I think we have a better idea what we have going into this first game this year.
And you mentioned Kyle Mccord. It's safe to say he is your backup?
Yeah, we haven't really talked about all that. We're still kind of in camp and working through that. But I think he's had a very good camp, and he's got to be ready to play in that first game. I mean, he's got to have that approach, and we'll talk more about that probably later in the week with those guys.
Ryan, when you were talking about Brian Hartline and the bigger picture stuff, what kind of responsibility does a head coach have to develop their assistant coaches, not only for how it helps your program, but for how it will help their careers down the line, even if that means at some point leaving a place like Ohio State?
No, I think it's a good point. I think that's important. I do. I think that's part of, in this profession, you want to have an impact on people. And I think about the coaches that I worked for and played for. They did that for me. So I think it's important in that.
You've talked about, I think, during the course of camp, just needing to be able to run the ball when the defense knows you're going to run the ball. Just the progression of that. When you have a 3rd and 1 against Notre Dame, where are you in where you think you need to be in being able to pick up that 3rd and 1?
Yeah, I mean, we've made good progress. I like where our line is. I like where our tight ends are. I like where the running backs are at, and that's going to be important. Yeah, for sure. But I think that we've worked at it, and the proof will be in the pudding when we play on September 3rd.
When you were talking about CJ's growing knowledge and all of this, philosophically, do you have an idea of how much you would be willing to sort of give a quarterback in a game of like, hey, sort of maybe take this and run a little bit and not call all the plays, but have more responsibility, not just checks, but maybe what do you have an idea of that? Do you want to not put too much on a college quarterback? And where are you with CJ in that progress?
No, it's probably an hour conversation, but I think that's. I know you got time. I don't. But I think that there are times where you try to figure that out in preseason, where you put a bunch on them, and then all of a sudden looks at you, it kind of gives you one of those looks, and all of a sudden you just take it all back, and you just. But I think that's the fun part of having a second-year quarterback and a third year in your program, and it's fun because he can handle a lot of information. But then sometimes you just got to go play the game. We can't make it overcomplicated. But he can take a lot on. He can, but I think that's the balance as a quarterback coach and a coordinator is, when is too much, when he's starting to worry about all those things where he can't just play the game, because even the most basic play, if you're not thinking about much, you're going to see that play a lot cleaner than if you're worried about changing the play, changing the protection, all those types of things. Now you can get your eyes on the coverage and some of the things that maybe, situation in the game, what's the down and distance, how much time on the clock. I mean, what is the defense coordinator thinking as opposed to I got to make this check or I got to make this, change in the protection. So, a lot of those things come into play, and finding that right balance of what gives us a competitive advantage and what allows them to play fast and clear is important and something that, we keep a close eye on.
Jim, when we look at JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, we see like a strong side guy, a weak side guy. Like, how well do they complement each other?
They're both, they're the consummate defensive linemen in terms of being active, athletic, but also big and strong. I don't know if you need to look at them as necessarily complementing each other because I really think both of them can do anything. You know what I mean? I think they're very similar. And you should expect to see them in a lot of different places and sometimes doing similar jobs.
Front row right, Austin Ward, Rivals, 97.1.
Jim, you talked a couple weeks ago about the cornerback numbers and the depth and the injuries. How do you feel differently now than you did a couple weeks ago about what you've got to work with there?
I do because, today we were out there and we almost had our full complement. So it's good to see those guys there and the ones who played when they were out, gained a lot of experience against excellent competition. But I think we have our, top guys back now, and it does give you a lot of confidence when they're out there because they can change the game in terms of coverage.
You probably didn't expect to see maybe so much of J.K. or Jair and Cam. That seems like it could be a benefit in the long run for you.
Yeah, I think anytime these things happen in football, you got to be next man up, and it all pays off down the road because of experience that they get, that they may not have gotten those reps, and we'll need them throughout the course of the season.
Front row middle, Bill Rabinowitz, Columbus Dispatch.
How much of your defense has been installed, and how comfortable are you with the rate of progress there?
We're up to about 75%, and I'm very comfortable with where we're at, because we're gonna have to pare it down now. We're gonna have to get specific to our opponent as we go. So I think we've come a long way in terms of installation, like I said, in the spring and again in fall camp, farther than I would have expected, and the players are very open to learning, and they want to be great. So that part of it has been exciting, and we've been able to get a lot in, but we're going to have to start to pare it back and get specific to our opponent.
You've never wanted to get to 100. You always wanted to get to.
Yeah, I mean, I never expected to get to 100. We'll keep some things in reserve, and pull them out as needed as we go through the season. But I don't like to spring things on the players that are brand new, as you're preparing for an opponent. My philosophy is get as much in as you can, and then use that, have enough so that you have answers. I think we've always been good in the second half. That's not because we're creating new things. It's because we're pulling from a tool chest that already has answers in it, and they're aware of it, and they know how it works.
2 weeks left, less than 2 weeks. What's your biggest concern about defense?
I don't have that many concerns. Now that the corners are coming back, I feel confident in what we have. Just seeing it in an actual game live situation, that's every year for a football coach. The first time you put them out there, you want them just to play as well as they can. And I have no concerns with them.
We'll go with Nathan Baird, second row middle, Nathan Baird, Cleveland.com, and right after that, Rob Waller, Columbus Dispatch.
Jim, I asked you specifically about J.K. Johnson the last time I talked to you, and at that time you were like, too early to tell, but you obviously saw a lot more after that. What were your impressions?
J.K. has really stepped up. I mean, he's increased his competitive level. He's increased his knowledge of the defense. He's just put himself in position where we feel comfortable putting him in the game. He's grown up pretty quickly.
Are you optimistic that Jordan will be available for the first game? And I guess just where do you see, because he's been limited a little bit in camp, where his development is right now?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. Above my pay grade. Not my bailiwick. We'll see.
Rob Waller, Columbus Dispatch.
You just talked about this the crucible moment of going from practice, everything's come together, you're comfortable, you're confident, to the bright lights, to the game. You've done this a while. Can there be a big difference? Have you know what I mean, that step up, how big a step up is that?
It depends on the experience you have, Fortunately, we have guys who have played a lot in games. I think that matters. That's important. And, certainly if you have someone who's never played in that kind of arena with all that on the line, it can be of concern. But I think we have enough experience. And plus the offense that we go against every day certainly tests us, and we try to treat practice like a game, and I'm on them all the time during practice, even though we're maybe in some mismatched situations. I want to explain everything to them, why it happened, when it did happen. So we try to make it as accountable as we can during practice. But I think we have enough experience that our guys are excited to go out and play, and they're ready for it.
You sleep well?
No. But I never sleep well, so the first game or not, doesn't matter.
Front row middle, Dave Biddle, 24/7 Sports.
Hi, Jim. Larry Johnson says he loves to rotate up front on the D-line. We've seen that here at Ohio State since he's been here. Correct me if I'm wrong, you do not like rotating too much in the back seven. You like having a main backup, but play the starters How does that mesh with your overall philosophy with Larry wanting to rotate a lot up front, you not wanting to rotate much in the back seven?
It's fine. I mean, the system is set up that those units can operate independently, and certainly your frontline troops, so to speak. I mean, they are taking the brunt of the attack all the time. So it's good when you have a lot of depth there. But yes, we want our front to be fresh. We want to play a lot of guys in the back end. I think you need to get into more of a flow with the game and the adjustments and how they're running their routes and their motions and shifts and all those things. So I feel like it's more important that those guys are in there and they see everything. But we rotate freely up front. That's great.
Just one more for me. When do you expect the defense will be fully installed? It doesn't sound like it'll be during the season, as you mentioned. So we're talking like during spring? Like when do you expect it'll be fully installed?
Yeah, it's just like I said, as we go through the season, we still have that. We have our tools, and they know them, and then we have, that things that I haven't quite sprung on them yet. But I think that by the end of the season, it'll crank up even more. But I got to be judicious with that. Like when you throw something new at them the week of an opponent, I don't like that. I mean, we used to do that all the time back in the old days, because I felt like you had time and offenses weren't that complicated, so you could come in with say, hey, this is what we're doing this week. You guys it's something brand new. Don't do that anymore. I like them to know everything that's going on and not spring too much on them, but we'll crank it up a few percentage points by the year's over just because we'll need some things. But we never really want to get to 100, right? We always want to leave a few things that nobody knows that we have, including the coaches or anybody. Just a few things like way back here I want to keep to myself.
Second row left, right behind him, Stephen Means, Cleveland.com.
Because you talked a little bit about Lathan last time we talked to you. What have you liked about him as a safety, especially in that bandit?
Who's that?
Lathan Ransom.
Lathan. He's decisive. He he pulls it. I call it pulling your trigger. I mean, he just goes. I mean, he's a football player. I guess, he sees the forest through the trees. I mean, he can diagnose the play extremely fast, and then he's aggressive with how he treats it. So you can't ask for more than a safety than that. And he's had an exceptional camp. In fact, I think I just put him up today. It was might be the only two-time Camp Silver Bullet Defender of the Day winner. He just stands out on the field in how he operates, and he plays at a fast tempo, and he's usually never wrong. Everyone makes mistakes, but he's usually never wrong. In any case, he's aggressive.
At all shocked or impressed at how quickly he's been able to get back on the field, even at New Year's Day?
Yeah, I mean that's I had no idea whether we would have him or not, or really what he can do. So I'm very impressed. I think he's going to have a great season.
Right behind him, Dan Hope, 11 Warriors.
Yeah, Jim, you've said you don't really want to rotate a lot in the back seven. Do you feel pretty comfortable about who those guys are right now that are going to be playing in the back seven?
I do. I mean, there are still some competitive situations, but I feel good about the group. And like I said, we'll play some guys, just nowhere near what they will, what Coach will on the defensive line. We'll play some, corner. You'd like to have an extra corner, an extra safety, an extra nickel, an extra linebacker. I think you can bring those guys along, bring them in certain situations with certain calls. So we'll have some guys, but I feel good about where we're at.
Ryan Day was saying that you've tailored your scheme to the talent that you have here. Are there things that have surprised you in your first offseason here where maybe you came in thinking you were going to do a certain thing and realized because of the players you had here that you should do something differently?
Well, I think, yeah, like I've said from the beginning, what has surprised me the most was how quickly they pick things up. You know, I mean, I think that's a change. They want to be great. They want to, you know, I know that some of them went through some tough times last year. You know, they want to avenge that. They want to step up. They want to learn. You know, I think that they all have visions of getting to the next level, and they want to learn. They want to pick your brain, and I think they've soaked it up. So that's been surprising to me how quickly they got that.
Deep left, Brendan Gulick, Buckeyes Now, Sports Illustrated.
Hey, Coach, this is such a broad question, but can you give us a sense about the pride that this group takes in trying to be a silver bullet defense? Because the last couple of years haven't lived up to that, to that moniker.
Yes, we talk about it all the time. It's the first thing that comes up when we have our unit meetings, and we talk about that legacy. So it's mentioned every day. You know, we don't talk about the past at all. You know, I wasn't here. I wasn't a part of it. You don't know until, you know, if you're not in that submarine, you don't really know. We don't talk about it at all. But we do talk to creating something special with the defense, reviving that silver bullet culture, having a defense that the fans can be proud of, and their parents and the rest of the team can look at as a strength. And we, you know, really there's no reason not to. Everything else at The Ohio State is top 5, and why shouldn't the defense be? You know, and then we live it. You watch them on the field, and then when you go over their mistakes and things that happen, you know, you can tell that, you know, that they take the pride there because they, you know, they're serious about it. They want to fix it. They want to answer why it happened, and I think that's all part of living up to that legacy.
Necessarily single out individual guys, but just the progress that you've made so far as a unit through camp. Are you further than you thought you'd be? Are you kind of where you thought you'd be? Are there certain areas you feel like you got to catch up on?
We are further than I thought we would be. I mean, absolutely. We have been able to create competitive situations against what arguably is, you know, the best offense and the best offensive coaches in the country, and we have been able to be competitive, and that's a big deal because you can only get better in practice, and that depends on who you're going against, what tempo, the situations, what's your attitude, and it has been competitive the whole time, and you know, now we have to replicate that on the field. But you feel better about it because you've seen it in practice. You know, you can't not get it done in practice and say, well, game day we're going to step up. You know, we're going to holler at each other and smack each other in the helmets, and that's going to make us play better. No, you have to do it on the grass. So I feel great about our competitiveness against you know, what is a great offense on a daily basis.
Front row right, Joey Kaufman, Columbus Dispatch.
Jim, as far as Tommy Eichenberg, you mentioned the other week that you said you're somebody who rarely makes mistakes, and I guess he seems to have a pretty good understanding of your defense. And for somebody who plays in the middle with a lot of responsibilities, how, I guess, does his timeline and picking up things compare to the guys you have had in the middle there?
Yeah, he's ahead of anyone I've had in terms of the pace that he's picked it up, which is great because we need it. You know, he's our guy there in the middle. His learning capacity, his ability to correct mistakes when he does make them, which is not often, you know, be accountable, figure them out, and, you know, not say much. Just take notes in his notebook, and he's a quiet guy and just get better. But his pace of learning is fantastic, and we're confident with him as our leader.
about him in the middle?
He's able to process, quickly. He's able to, read his keys because they change at times, and he's able to read the offensive formation and play and diagnose, see what's coming before it happens, and that's a big deal for a linebacker.
And just you mentioned kind of the way he was kind of writing stuff down and picked up stuff. Is there a carryover effect with guys in the rest of the room and the team? What sort of effect did that have?
Yeah, because they see him. He's a serious dude, man. He just takes the game serious. He takes his learning experience serious. He wants to know things. He's not jacking around, and guys follow that. They see how he operates, as a professional, and they pick up on it.
Third row left. Bill Landis, Rivals.
Jim, your two backers last year played like 90% of the snaps. I think your safeties were like 85% of the snaps. You envision that being similar here, or do you think you might have a little more depth to where maybe it's not as dramatic as it was in Oklahoma?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we have a little more depth here. I think it's still going to be swing more to the top group, but we do have more depth here than I've had in the past, so there'll be more guys that play.
And it sounds like you have, 5-6 safeties you feel pretty good about. When it comes to working all of those guys into a game, like a Lathan or a Court, is that a case where you feel good putting those guys in sort of no matter what, along with like Ronnie and Josh just rotating, or is it more opponent game plan specific when it comes to getting those guys on the field?
Yeah, it's both. You have to feel confident with them playing at any time, right? Because if you're a backup, you're one play away. So you got to be confident with them playing at any time. But then you have the other part of control, which this is a tough game to control from a defensive standpoint, right? We're playing defense, and by that nature, you're not in control. You try to take back control. I think we do that well with some of our aggressiveness. The TFLs, the sacks, that's our way of taking back control. But we do have control over substitution, and how you can get a guy in a certain situation so that he'll succeed.
Do you have a greater ability to utilize sub packages here than maybe you've had in the past?
Yeah, I think we have guys who can be combo guys, true combo guys, and by that, you have a combo guy who's a D-line linebacker combo guy, but the tougher one to find is the combo guy who's a DB linebacker type. You look at Court, and he's got a real shot in that role, So you could have him in the game, and he could be a linebacker, or at the same time, he could be a safety. So it doesn't give away your hand as much,
Got time for just a couple more. Second row middle, Doug Lane Reese, Cleveland.com.
Jim, the progress has the Jack become the Leo yet at this point, or what's the progress of that position?
No, I think we've made a lot of progress, but we're not quite to that point yet. There are still certain roles and defining factors that may take a while. It may take the whole year to find, okay, how are we able to have this guy on the field and have him do, 3 different things. So it's a work in progress, and we'll see as we get into live action. You start to see, okay, this guy can handle this. Can he handle that? Can he handle that? Can he handle that? When you get to the point where one guy can handle any call that I make, that's when it really goes to that next level. Where you don't have to pair your package to, okay, when this guy's in there, I got these 5 calls. When it's perfect, and that takes a while. One guy's in there, and you got every call you could possibly have.
You guys in the opener will face one of the best tight ends in the country, in Michael Mayer at Notre Dame. What's the kind of skill set? What kind of player defensively are you looking for to utilize in matchups like that against a pass catching tight end who's
You have to have someone who has size, so he just doesn't get bodied out, and you need to have someone who is able to play the run, because typically he's around the ball, and going out at the same time. So you really need to have a bigger player, someone that can get his hands on him early, because you just don't want to let him run free. I mean, everybody needs to know where he is, and including the linebackers. Even if you're not covering him, you need to know where he is, so you can be a factor in defending him.
And the guys on this roster who would fit that description are big, maybe.
I mean, I think you could, yeah. I feel like all our safeties can do it. We have good. Ronnie is a physical dude. Lathan is a physical dude. He may be a little taller than them, but they're gonna be willing to step up and use their hands, use their body, be aggressive in coverage, and that's the most important part.
And just on the offensive side of the ball, real quick, what has been your since you got here, your evaluation of C.J. Stroud, of just somebody, his understanding of the game, his processing of the game, what you see when you're trying to go against him in practice, what he's doing? What's your veteran view on your QB?
It's a superior. I mean, top of the line. I mean, I was around Eli Manning at Ole Miss. I think I've said that before, but whatever we did in practice, Eli knew, because every defense has a weakness. So the faster the quarterback can process it and find it, like in everything that we do is trying to hide that hole, because you really need 13 guys to play defense if you're going to cover everything, right? So you're always trying to disguise it, get the quarterback to hold the ball a little bit. And CJ's just been, he picks all that up. He and I talk. He asks questions. He wants to learn. He's really the best I've been around in terms of the way he handles, because we're doing a lot more now than we did back in 2003 in terms of throwing things at him. And he's fantastic. I don't think he makes mistakes, and I'm glad he's on my side and I don't have to play him.
And final questions, front row right, Tim May, Letterman Row.
Are we going to get him next week too?
We haven't spoken about
Okay.
it yet, but we'll talk.
Okay. Well, I just want to know what to ask. Jim, what is your charge, your orders, whatever you want to call it, to your defensive front in your defense now, as you've grown accustomed to these players and stuff? What do you want from them generally, and specifically those guys between the tackles? I mean, the three and maybe the nose and stuff. What specifically do you want to see out of them?
Yeah, I want them to attack. I want them to be aggressive. Yes, I want them to hold their gap and hunker down at times when it comes to that. But for the most part, I want them to be aggressive. Our philosophy is, let those guys go. Let them create problems for the offensive line in terms of how they move, the stunts that they run or the straight ahead attack. The way that we do things with the package, the whole goal is to put the offensive linemen, the offense, kind of on their heels. So when they step, they don't quite know what they're going to get. It's that brief second of indecision that allows our guys to attack and create a new line of scrimmage. And look, if they get out of their gap, linebackers have to cover for them. That's the way it works when you have aggressive guys. So I really want them to be fresh. I want them to attack. I want them to think about making plays. I don't want them to just have to hunker down and hold. There's going to be times that they know they have to do that, and they're willing to do that for the team, because that's what happens sometimes where they have to do it. But we want to clear the double teams off them. We want to get them freed up. We want to create as many through our disguises and bluffs and movements. We want to create as many one-on-one matchups as we can get up front. The more one-on-one matchups we can get with those guys feeling free to be able to operate, we're going to win.
Toward that end, there have been a couple of guys that have jumped out at you over the last 2 weeks. I mean, that have surprised you, whatever you want to call it. I mean, a couple of young guys stepping up. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I feel we are so deep and so talented up front that you can really name any of them. And I'm not trying to be political there, but I mean, we really have a lot of depth, a lot of talent, a lot of guys that are willing to go hard and play hard. So you're going to see a lot of guys play, and you're going to see a lot of guys make plays.
one last one. Is it an advantage to you that Notre Dame went against your defense, even though you weren't there? Is it an advantage in preparation standpoint of seeing how they tried to adjust or whatever to the defense that you put in? Anyway, in absentia, you weren't there, but has it given you a little bit of a preparation advantage?
I don't know about advantage, but I know that it helps me to see how a team responds to the defense, your defense, and or because when you play an opponent, you're usually trying to find people that they've played that look like you, so you can have an idea. But we're able to gather some knowledge from that. So I don't know about advantage, but I know it's good for me to be able to see that for sure.
Coach, thank you very much.
All right, folks, hope you enjoyed those. A lot of interesting nuggets. Jim Knowles is a guy I could listen to all day long. That guy is just a fountain of useful information. So, like I mentioned earlier, please keep it locked in here for more interviews, players, coaches, everybody. All right, I'll talk to you later. Go Bucks.